have a business. And the crazy thing about this is that the irony is that it's never been lower risk to start a business than today. And so if you rewind 100 years in 1924, you would have had to save for 15 years, have a house, use your house as leverage to go to the bank and say, will you help me start this bakery? And then the bakery had real cost. And if you went out of business, you went bankrupt, you lost your reputation, and then that was it. You'd be known as a failure for the rest of your time. Now, because of that, the stakes were higher, people tried way harder, but fewer people did. And so the trade is now, it's way lower barrier to entry, and also a lot of people who have no work ethic can get into it. But it also requires the same amount of work, but less risk. You still have to work just as hard as you did however long ago, but you don't need to risk as much to get in. And I think that's pretty cool. And so fundamentally, that's why the creator economy overall is just booming, because one person won't bring down the system, but a million tiny players will bring down the whole thing, because they each will beat that one big player at their tiny sliver.
Could you break down the math? How much money could I actually generate?
Well, so I want to be really clear about claims, implied claims, anything like that. All businesses involve risk in general. So if you pay for a platform that's $99 a month, then your risk is $99 a month. All right, just to be clear. Beyond that, the amount of money you make is subject to how hard you try, how much you promote. But if you were to look at, and I think this is a decent proxy, if you look at some of the largest communities that exist in general on the internet, outside of school, you've got many, many communities that are at $1 million, $5 million, $10 million a month. And it's because you have a single player, free distribution, and basically as long as you have a good enough product and a ton of traffic to bring people into that product, then people will pay to be in there and see. Well, let me give you a little tidbit. So a lot of people are like, well, what do I put inside of a community? I'm gonna give you a little tactical nugget here. All right, so ProfitWell, which is owned by a buddy of mine who just sold it for $250 million, did a really cool 14,000 business survey of what were the features that people were buying that had the highest willingness to pay. So WTP is willingness to pay. And then I can't remember what these four were, but basically they looked at all these different features that people had in communities and which ones people wanted to buy the most versus things they thought were par for course versus things that they didn't really care about at all. And so it's kind of like care versus willingness to pay. So if you have a lot of care, so care, let's put it this way. So they care a lot and they're really willing to pay. This is where you want to be. They care a lot, but they're not willing to pay means you have to do it. It's kind of like protein in your supplement stack. Like people care a lot, but you're not really willing to pay an arm and a leg for it because it's almost like an expected, right? And then on the flip side, this would be the worst thing, which is like no one cares and no one's willing to pay. So don't do anything in here. And so they had things like discounts, like if you have a community where you put like exclusive discounts, like merch. Merch is one that was over here. Like some people like merch, some people don't. Like some people are willing to pay. On the care spectrum, not really high. Over here, and this is where it gets really interesting or important. Newsletter was something that people like kind of expected for a community. They want some sort of regular communication, but they weren't like willing to pay a huge amount for it. But the big three that were in here, and so I include this one as my number 4, by the way, because I want to make sure I do that, right? Is they wanted exclusive access. So that means Q&As, talking to experts. They want to be closer. Think proximity, either digitally or in person, but just for the sake of this conversation for digital community, it's like they want to be able to ask you questions. And so that means like they post and you respond, or you hop on a call and you respond. Any of those things would count. So number 1 was access. Number 2 was content, meaning they like some of the stuff that you put publicly. They just want more of that stuff privately that they can't get somewhere else. And so you have exclusive access, exclusive content as the second kind of bucket. Courses would fall under this, trainings, things like that. And the final one, which surprised me actually, was events. And so people in a community want to be able to meet up. They want to meet up in person. You can also do virtual events, of course, but I think the real power is if you can meet people in person, have them fly in or fly out to them, depending on the size of the community. And so these are the big 4 that people put into communities to drive value. Is that I will be the one talking to you, I'll respond to your stuff via DM, I'll respond to your posts inside the feed, or I'll have calls on some regular cadence where you can expect some sort of response time from me. content, here's some additional training, here's some course, here's some whatever that I can put in here to provide even more value.